Hey there, I'm Scott Winfield, and welcome to Victorian Opera's web series Artists in Isolation. On this episode, we're delighted to be joined by greatly talented conductor Daniel Carter. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Now, as we can probably tell from the cuckoo clock behind you, you are in Germany. Whereabouts in Germany are you?
I'm in the Black Forest, which is in the south of Germany. We're right near the border with Switzerland and with France. We're kind of in the corner at the very bottom of Germany.
How fantastic. What an ideal place to be. How long have you been there for?
We've only been down in this part of the world for a few days, and we're at my girlfriend's parents' place. We've only come back here yesterday. So it's we both we met working in Freiburg. That was my previous position as principal conductor in Freiburg, and Freiburg is this beautiful kind of city or town in the Black Forest, but Freiburg's right at the bottom in kind of a valley, and then you go up into the Black Forest in each direction. And so her parents live in about an hour out of Freiburg, but that also means when you go down into Freiburg, it's a bit of a trek, and you don't want to be going up and down every single day. So we've come back up to her parents yesterday, and now we're really in the middle of green and sunshine. And you can, on a day where there's good weather, you can see the Alps in the distance. It's very kind of, it's a nice place to be spending a break.
How has your experience of COVID-19 been so far, and where have you spent the majority of your time?
Well, I live in Berlin, so I've spent basically the entire time in Berlin. We were rehearsing for the coming operas, and then suddenly, well, it wasn't even really sudden. It was a bit strange because we kind of had the feeling that this was coming, and it had been spoken about a few times. But we ended up doing a rehearsal for a performance on a Friday. The performance would have taken place on Friday. We rehearsed on Thursday, knowing that the performance had already been cancelled for some reason. I think they just wanted to keep us busy. It kept us out of trouble, I guess. And so, yeah, we kind of had this feeling that this was coming, and we'd seen it going into other countries, but it came to us in a way quite late. But then everything simply shut, and that was that. That was, the opera house completely shut. It was bizarre because at one point I went on a bike ride when they started relaxing the rules. I went on a bike ride and I went past the opera house, and they have these huge, almost military grated gates that close everything off. I had no idea that these gates even existed. They're always open, even if it's after midnight or something. These gates are open, but not during lockdown. It looked like some kind of military installment. It was absolutely bizarre to see an opera house like that. But yeah, so basically, we spent the whole time in our apartment, and we have a supermarket directly across the road. I mean, it's about 10 steps from the front door. And so we literally lived within these, the only kind of fresh air we had was these kind of 10 steps to the supermarket.
Oh no, 10, I hope there were 10 very slow steps.
Yeah, exactly. I think over the weeks they became slower and slower.
Yes.
But yeah, we literally just spent, as everyone did. I spent most of the time learning the ring. I thought this is probably going to be the only time in my life where I have the time without having to prepare anything else, where I can say, okay, I'm only going to do that. And that was actually great. That was incredibly, to try and find something good that's come out of it all. That was incredibly luxurious way to be able to spend my time.
You've been living in Germany for a number of years and lead an incredibly prestigious and extraordinarily productive career. Could you tell us about your latest appointment, because it is a very, very impressive one?
Yeah, so I've just been appointed as Generalmusikdirektor at the Landestheater Coburg, which is, my first kind of boss job. Coburg is actually the place where the British royal family come from. So it's a very small town, but it's a very wealthy town, and they have a theater which is much too big for a town of that size. We have, as it is in Germany, there's a kind of ensemble system. So there are singers who are full-time employees of theaters and opera houses, and you mostly use those people to cast each of your operas. So we have a full-time singer ensemble, full-time chorus, an orchestra of 63 full-time. We have a full-time ballet ensemble, and a full-time uh, drama ensemble. And it's an incredibly beautiful theater. It's just this kind of glorious. I think it was built in 1840. It's in desperate need of renovation, but it's very beautiful. And as I say, it's actually where the British royal family came from. They were the House of Coburg, of Saxon-Gotha Coburg, until the end of the First World War. And then there was a lot of racism against Germans in the UK after the First World War. And so they changed their name to the House of Windsor. But therefore, in both world wars, because it was actually where the roots of the family came from, they didn't allow the city to be attacked. So everything there is original. It's all incredibly old, and it's a very beautiful part of the world. But yes, so I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. It presents a lot of different challenges, I've never had to deal with, especially in Corona time. Because of course, as a young conductor, you collect music that you want to do. You collect music that you find fascinating, combinations of pieces which you find fascinating. And so at the beginning, I've now planned the concert season, in particular, 5 different times for 5 different versions of Corona.
Can I just say, what a nightmare and what patience you must have.
Well, a patience maybe, but I also found it incredibly, in a way, liberating. Okay. I came across a whole lot of composers who I'd never heard of in my life. And a whole lot of music I would simply never have heard. You know, when they say to you, okay, you can play your symphony concerts, but until further notice, you can have maximum 32 people on stage. Then you have to say, okay, you know, there are some classics of that kind of repertoire, but you also need to really think outside the box of it. And so that was for me quite a liberating thing to say, okay, I'm now in a situation where no one expects me to program a Mahler symphony. So I don't even have to bother to think about it. I don't have to sit there and go, which Mahler symphony would I like to do? I do. It doesn't have to discuss. So what can I do, and how can I do it properly? Yes, I mean the rules here are also different in every state, and so that has made it a bit more complicated because I'm currently working at the opera in Berlin and living in Berlin, and there the rules are relaxing much faster than Bavaria, which is where Coburg is. And so in Bavaria, they're quite conservative. And so I kept kind of going to Coburg and saying, oh yeah, in Berlin, we've just done this. So, you know, we could do so. Oh, no, in Bavaria, we cannot do that. Okay, fine. So that's also been slightly frustrating, but interesting to learn.
What, in terms of the music that you've discovered that you may program in whatever iteration of next year's season you're able to present, what have been some of the great pearls that you've found?
I discovered a whole lot of Icelandic music.
Oh, wow.
Icelandic orchestral music. I knew none of it. But there's just a huge amount of very, very unique, very, very beautiful. But in a way that there are some composers who kind of existed and expressed their surroundings. Like, I mean, the most famous example is clearly Sibelius, and he expressed so beautifully his surroundings, but in a way that is entirely personal to him, and where there aren't necessarily people who before or after him wrote in that style. There are a bunch of Icelandic composers who express something completely differently, but somehow unbelievably beautifully in a kind of Sibelius-like way. But this is music which we never hear. And I discovered that because in a way that we have the Australian Music Centre, of course, other countries have similar things. And I don't even know how, because you go down these rabbit holes and you lose an entire day of your life. And I ended up on basically the Icelandic Music Centre's website and spent a good day of my life discovering Icelandic orchestral music.
I would love to reflect on your experiences with Victorian Opera, because that formed a very early part of your development, working with Richard Gill and later with Richard Mills. How did Victorian Opera help nurture your development?
Well, Victorian Opera really was my development. I arrived at VO when I was 18 and really, really wanted to be an opera conductor and knew absolutely nothing about anything. And I was given opportunities, some of which I was maybe ready for, and others of which I was in absolutely no way ready for. But where without those opportunities, I mean, I wouldn't be here. That is, that's the simple answer. That the opportunities that were afforded to me at a very young age were completely unique, and I feel very privileged to have been a part of that. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. Without VO, I simply wouldn't be here. As in, I would still be alive. I'd like to think, but I wouldn't be in Germany conducting opera. Everything kind of started from there. I started there, having to learn the repertoire from absolutely zero, not knowing the first thing about Magic Flute or Bohème or anything like that. And over time, I was simply trained. No, this is what's expected of you. This is not good enough. You have to do this. You have to do that. And it was really with that training that I reached a level, but also I think a level of expectation where once I was out of that kind of protected environment, I didn't straight away fall flat on my face, because I knew what was expected of me, and that's quite unique, because these are lessons which everyone has to learn, but most people don't necessarily have the privilege to be in that position where I in my early years in VO, I fell on my face a lot of times, but there was someone there to pick me up, and that was incredibly valuable time, for which I'm incredibly grateful.
What have been some of the most enriching and indeed most challenging experiences?
Oh, my very first day of work in Germany. I was in Hamburg at the State Opera, and I had to play a day of Lohengrin rehearsals. And I didn't really speak any German. I'd learned a bit of German, and I'd made sure to prepare the things that I thought you're going to need in a rehearsal room. I'd prepared numbers and things like that. So I thought if someone tells me play from this bar, I can do it. I know what the number is. I know what the word for bar is. I can do it. And about 5 minutes into the rehearsal, the cast realized, it was a very small cast, and the director realized that they all came from Bavaria, and they all started speaking dialect. And I just sat at the piano thinking,
"Oh no!
Can't be serious! You just can't."
Oh, Daniel.
Serious. So that was an interesting moment. I think the other challenge, or the biggest challenge, was then, especially in Hamburg and Berlin, there's just so much repertoire. In both houses, we do about 40 operas a season, and to simply be on top of so many operas at once. I don't have to do all 40, thank goodness. But in Hamburg, in one season, I was doing 20-something, 21, 22 operas a season. And in Berlin, wow, I think I'm doing mostly 15 or 16 operas a season. It's a lot of music. And I think that was also there I had, in a way, a lot of luck, and I was very blessed that I'd had these experiences with VO, and then after VO with Opera Australia, because then when I arrived in Hamburg, there were, of course, so many operas I needed to learn. I'd never done any Wagner, for example. But then in between those, there were pieces that I knew. And so, there would be, okay, I have to play Lohengrin. I've never done Lohengrin in my life. I'm going to have to work and really learn this. But then Rigoletto would come, and I think, okay, phew, at least I know that, And so that was a real blessing. But even then, even with pieces that refreshing them, you have to be organized, and you have to have a timetable, because there's just so much repertoire.
Reflecting on COVID-19, what's brought you balance during this experience?
Balance is not really a great part of my life, but probably, living with my girlfriend and with our dog, and going out with the dog every day, and it's very, in a way, I think that it's balancing for me, just having other kind of living things in the apartment, and the fact that you could be studying and you can be very in yourself and very, okay, I have to learn this next thing, I have to know this better, and things like that. And then a dog comes and scratches at your leg because they want to go out. That's very kind of grounding and very,
yes,
it brings you back into the real world, because my dog doesn't care if I've learned Tristan or not. My dog wants to go out.
Your dog needs to be fed.
Exactly, it needs to be fed, needs to go out, and really does not care two hoots about Tristan.
Daniel, as our final question, what's the first thing that you'd like to do after this time passes?
Conduct the ring. Come on. Spend all this time learning it. It's time to stand up the front and do it.
That's going to be pretty damn momentous.
Yeah, I mean, it's meant to be next March. We'll see what happens.
Fingers
I have a
crossed.
feeling, yeah, I was about to say, I have a feeling that it won't be next March. But then maybe the year after. We'll see.
Daniel, it's been such a pleasure to chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and please stay safe.
Thank you, you too.
For more chats with artists in isolation, you can follow Victorian Opera across social media or visit victorianopera.com.au. I'm Scott Winfield. Thanks for watching.